Okay, the first book of Samuel. It's also called the first book of the kingdoms. We don't really usually call that here, but you may see that name sometimes. It was originally written in Hebrew. Traditionally, the prophet Samuel is credited as the author, with the prophets Gad and Nathan completing the book after Saul's death in chapter 25. But even what portion Samuel wrote is debated. And you'll find the phrase "to this day" sometimes. For example, in 1 Samuel 5:5, it'll say, "even to this day." What does that suggest when I say "even to this day"? Yeah, that we're a little bit past "to this day." As I know, I have that sort of Kentucky habit of saying "the other day," meaning within the past 5 to 10 years. But when you say "to this day," the implication is not that it was just a day or two, right? When someone says "to this day," it seems like some time has passed, and you're letting people know that even though some time has passed, this hasn't changed. So that phrase "to this day" suggests that the book may have been written some years in the future from when it is set. It is set in the period when Israel is moving from being led by various judges to being ruled by a king. And 1 Samuel is actually the first half of one work, the book of Samuel. It was split into 2 volumes when they translated it into the Greek for the Septuagint. So really, if you think of it as one big book, Samuel dies before we get to the middle. The structure, just kind of break down the sections here. The first 7 verses will tell us the story of Samuel. Chapters 8 through 15 are the story of Saul. Then when you get to chapters 16 through 31, roughly the last half of 1 Samuel, we'll deal with both the stories of David and Saul, as we'll read important things about both of them. And then it's 2 Samuel that actually deals just with David and tells the story of David's kingship. Still some sort of key events, sort of to give us an idea of sort of the broad structure of the book. We're going to start with the birth of Samuel. In chapter 3, the Lord first calls Samuel. In chapter 4, the Philistines are going to take the Ark of the Covenant, and we'll see the death of Eli the high priest. Then we get to the Israelites will request the king. Samuel anoints Saul. David is anointed in chapter 16. He will slay Goliath in chapter 17. And we won't get to the death of Saul until chapter 31. So many chapters after David is anointed before we see the end of Saul's kingship. And we won't actually see David become king in this book. It's in 2 Samuel chapter 2, he'll become king of Judah. And in chapter 5, he'll become king of all Israel. All right, so I want to start out here. I want to look at some of the proper nouns, mostly people, but also this place they're going to be mentioned in the first book. I don't know about you, but when I read an Old Testament book especially, it's sometimes hard for me to keep track of the people and places. I'll read a name, I'll figure out who they are, and then a chapter later their name is used again and I don't remember who they are because the names are kind of hard to follow. So to help us kind of focus on, know what we're reading, I want to look at a couple of sort of definitions of some of the things we're going to see here in the early part of the book. And one is Shiloh, which means peaceful place. It's in the territory of Ephraim, and this is where the tabernacle was pitched in Joshua 18, chapter 1. And so Shiloh will begin losing its significance after the Ark of the Covenant is taken from there in chapter 4. But the tabernacle stood there for a long time. Remember, the tabernacle is a tent. So one of the advantages of a tent is you can take it down and pitch it somewhere else, and they did that frequently until the tabernacle came to Shiloh, and it was pitched in that one spot for over 3 centuries, traditionally 369 years. We're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. So this would be, if you had pitched a tent on July 4th, 1776, to celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence, it would not have stood in that one location as long as the tabernacle had stood in Shiloh when we get to this point. And I think that may be important later, we'll see. And then when the ark was returned, it was not brought back to Shiloh. Jeremiah 7:12 talks about this place, says, "But go now to my place which was in Shiloh, where I set my name at the first, and see what I did to it because of the wickedness of my people." So he says that when he says my place cannot be referring to Shiloh, because my place was in Shiloh. So what would that suggest what would be God's place in Shiloh at this time? The tabernacle, right? So we're not talking about the whole city. We're talking about the tabernacle. That was God's place. It was in Shiloh. He says you can still go and you can still see what's left of his place. So there must have been some ruin or remnant of this place visible in Shiloh in the days of Jeremiah. There must have been still some evidence. You must have been able to go there and see evidence that the tabernacle had once stood there. After 369 years, a more permanent structure may have been added to the tent. I say that because if we're just talking about the tent itself, there wouldn't have been any ruins that you could see after its destruction. In the Middle Ages, a Jewish scholar recorded the tradition that Shiloh, because it sat there so long, they actually built walls around the courtyard of it, and that may be what it's talking about. And you can find, you can find many modern individuals claiming various stone walls in the ruins of Shiloh today or locations of the tabernacle. I don't think any of these can be positively identified. I Googled it, and there was someone was showing little stones just on the ground, and they'll show the dimensions and say, oh, this is probably where the tabernacle was, and someone else will show another, and someone else will show another. And obviously, if you could tell where it was, they would all have the same location. But what it did show to me was seeing all these remnants of all these stone walls is there was a ton of walls built in the city of Shiloh. So it would be natural that they had built some around the tabernacle, and that may be what you could see the ruins of, according to Jeremiah 7. Okay, so look at a couple of the people we're going to see here. And we're never sure how to say these, so I tried to give some pronunciations. What I found is no two people seem to be able to agree on the correct pronunciations for a lot of these things. And part of that comes from the fact that there's a Hebrew pronunciation, and there's ways we've kind of always said some of these in English. For example, Hannah is apparently Kana, but we always say Hannah. That's the way we've always said it. I'm not going to change that in this class. But some of these have developed their own English pronunciations. So we're going to see Elkanah, but in English it's often pronounced Elkanah. Again, Kana, which we call Hannah. I couldn't find an English pronunciation for Penina, but I couldn't find a consistent Hebrew pronunciation either. Some sources said Penina, some says Penina. And then Eli, we will call him Eli. Hophni or Hopni. Hopni makes more sense to me because that seems to be the way PH is usually pronounced in Hebrew. But I did see a lot of sources claiming that even in Hebrew it's Hophni. So Hophni or Hopni. And in English it seems to usually be Hophni or Hophni. Penikas, but we always call that Phineas. And then Samuel would have been Shmuel. Everyone seems to agree that Shmuel was the correct pronunciation of that, but that's another name that's entered into English as Samuel. So I'll try to pronounce these the way they're usually pronounced in English, but here's just to give you an idea of some of the ways you'll hear these. And what I want to do is I want to look at sort of an overview of each of these people, again, so we kind of have an idea of who they are before we read about them in the story to help us kind of keep track of them. So Elkanah is from the city of Ramazzaim Zophiim, which is part of Ephraim. But 1 Chronicles 6:27 establishes that Elkanah is a Levite. Ramathaim Zophiim is not one of the 48 Levite cities listed in Joshua 21. But apparently you didn't have to live in those cities because we have a Levite live. There was one of them that may have been nearby. No one knows really for sure exactly where a lot of these cities was, but the city of Beth Horon is one of the Levite cities and may have been very close to this city. He's the husband of both Hannah and Penina. He loved Hannah more, and he's the father of Samuel and other children. We're going to see Hannah. She's the wife of Elkanah. She was a Levite also. She was initially barren, but she becomes the mother of Samuel and other children after Samuel. She had a tense relationship with Elkanah's other wife, Penina, and Hannah vowed if the Lord blessed her with a son, she would dedicate her son as a gift to the Lord. Penina is Elkanah's other wife. She had children when Hannah did not. She was listed second, so she may have been Elkanah's second wife. If so, Elkanah may have married her so he could have children since Hannah was barren. She taunted Hannah for her barrenness. Eli was the high priest and a judge of Israel. He's the father of Hophni and Phinehas. Eli was a good man, but his sons were disobedient to God. He's judged by God for his failure to discipline his sons, and he died at 98 years old when he fell backwards after learning his sons had died in battle and the Ark of the Covenant had been captured by the Philistines. And then Hophni and Phinehas, their sons of the high priest Eli, they were disobedient, greedy, and lustful. God punished them by having them lose their lives in battle with the Philistines who took the Ark of the Covenant. And then Samuel, son of Elkanah and Hannah, born in answer to his mother's prayer. Because of his mother's vow, he was dedicated to the Lord and went to live with the high priest Eli at the temple as a child. And he became a great prophet and the last judge of Israel. So we're going to jump in and read the first 11 verses. We'll see some of these individuals here. I'll read it since I'm the one on the microphone. And then we'll look at these verses in a little more detail. Now there was a certain man of Rothaim Zophaim of the mountains of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zephu, an Ephraimite. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, the name of the other was Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. This man went up from his city yearly to worship the sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And whenever the time came for Elkanah to make an offering, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it was year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, that she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? For am I not better to you than 10 sons? So Hannah arose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat of the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. Okay, so Elkanah gives Hannah a double portion in verse 5 in the Masoretic text, but a single portion in the Septuagint. So I wanted to look at this. I thought it was an interesting conflict between the 2 versions. So I'm talking about the difference between the Hebrew text, which is what language the book was originally written in, and the way it appears in the Greek translation. So the New King James Version, we said, but to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. But in the Greek, it's, when you translate it, it's the New King James Septuagint, to Hannah he gave 1 portion, since she was without child. However, Elkanah loved Hannah more than the other one, but the Lord had closed her womb. Now the pulpit commentary says that the Hebrew is literally 1 portion of 2 faces, which may mean 1 portion big enough for 2 persons. But that commentary actually favors the Septuagint reading. Possibly because there's a little bit of ambiguity of what it actually means to say 1 portion of 2 faces. It's not literally saying a double portion. Okay, so questions. So taking the first reading, why might Elkanah have given Hannah a double portion? He loves her. You think so? Just because he likes her better, he gives her more? There's definitely some favoritism here. The text is very clear about that. It's not. It doesn't seem that he just kind of favors her a little bit, but it seems to be quite obvious. What's maybe some evidence in the text that it's obvious, at least to those close to the situation, that you can tell he really likes her better? Was there anything we read in there that maybe hints? Okay, yeah, even when we read the verse, it even gave that as the reason, because he liked her better. And I'll come back to that. That's that question I kind of threw out there a second ago. I'll hold, because I actually have that coming up a little bit later. But yeah, it says in the text that he liked her better. At least in the Hebrew text, it says he liked her better is the reason he gives her twice as much. If he only gave her one, what's the reason that he might only give Hannah one, even though he likes her better? Logistical reason. Yeah, one mouth to feed, right? Yeah, why does she only have one mouth to feed? She has no kids. So Peninnah might actually need more. You know, I don't know if the wives are responsible for providing to their children from their portion. If they have little children, though, they might be. So, and you can see that if you go back to the text there, he gave one portion since she was without child. So it seems to give that as the reasoning why she might only need one portion. Okay, the other says Elkanah loved Hannah more than the other. Okay, I've got that slide messed up there. Okay. There's also a lot of spelling errors in this. So I have a very busy weekend. I wanted to go through the slides and try to fix the spelling and grammar. I did a little bit this morning. I was finding spelling errors left and right. So there's probably still some in there. Okay. So why would Peninnah be mean to Hannah? What's that? She's a nasty person? Okay. Do you think that's... Jealousy. Why? Why is she jealous? Yeah, so she has kind of a reason to be jealous, don't you think? And this is what I was getting at, to how we can kind of tell that the favoritism is obvious here, right? Because it seems to be provoking Peninnah. I don't know that she's necessarily... I mean, we might assume that she's just would be unhappy having someone else, I don't want to put the word for it, but being married to a man who's married to another woman. That can't be easy. Does anybody think does anybody like that idea? Does anybody, particularly of the women in the class, does anybody think that's a good idea? Probably, even if he treated them equally, there would be a lot of potential for jealousy. But I think one of the reasons we probably see Peninnah being so cruel to Hannah is because Eli is showing so much favoritism to Hannah. Also, I do think Hannah was probably the first wife, since she is listed first in the description. So Peninnah may have known what she was getting into. It's not like Hannah. Hannah may have, in some sense, more reason to be jealous because she's the one wife and then a second wife gets brought in. But Peninnah seems to show greater jealousy. Maybe it's just a matter of her personality. Maybe Hannah has a better disposition, and Peninnah would have been happy with anything. But I think we can sympathize a little bit with Peninnah, because it's probably not easy. We'll get to Charlie in just a second. Probably not easy being the wife of a husband who loves his other wife more. What you have?
Well, Peninnah had produced sons.
Yeah.
And that's an honor to the husband. And he's honoring the wife that hasn't produced any children. That's one of the great things.
Okay, yeah, if you couldn't hear that, because Peninnah had produced children, right? This is in this culture, this is seen as something that she's doing in honor of her husband. This is a gift to him. We even notice that when we get to Hannah's prayer, well, she doesn't pray for a child, she prays for a son. And so to be able to give children to a husband, to be able to give sons especially to a husband, was a manner of honor. And so Peninnah probably looks and says, I'm the one that's doing all the work, right? Look at all I'm giving you, and yet I get less in return than this useless wife who can't even produce kids, which is kind of how she may have been seen in this culture. Oh, yeah. So Peninnah is doing all the work, and Hannah doesn't have to go through the pain of childbirth, gets to have all her time to herself, doesn't have to watch the kids, and she's getting more love from her husband. But that's not the way Hannah sees it, right? Hannah is brokenhearted, she's weeping, she's not eating, right? So Peninnah may look at Hannah's childlessness as her not honoring her husband or not doing anything for her husband, but Hannah's reaction is to be really upset. So why was Hannah brokenhearted, weeping, and not eating? What's the big deal? She's still being taken care of, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be able to honor the Lord, honor around
Right, so she wants children. And I think that's kind of obvious. That's most people in our society want children, even, where it's not as important to have them, but culturally here, it's a much bigger deal.
And it becomes clear later on that she wants to devote and fully to the Lord.
Oh, yeah,
Just about,
right, it's not just about her. She wants a child that can be devoted to the Lord, right? Okay, Elkanah's reaction to Hannah's reaction, though. So we all agree that it makes sense that she is upset, that we understand. Elkanah doesn't really understand, is he? Why doesn't Elkanah understand why Hannah is brokenhearted, weeping, and not eating? Thinking like a man, what were you going to say? Yeah, he's thinking like a man. Okay, what does that mean? What do you mean he's thinking like a man?
He says, am I not better than you than 10 sons?
Yeah, am I not better than you than 10 sons? Why do you need sons for? You got me. You know, I'm loving you better than I'm loving my other wife. Come on, you know, what do you want? Yeah, so he kind of seems to find Hannah maybe almost ungrateful, like I'm giving you more love, I'm better than 10 sons, and yet you're still upset. Do you find Hannah ungrateful? I mean, she's probably getting twice as much as the other wife. What does she have to be upset about? No, I don't think you even see it that way. I'm kind of, you know, I think our mindset is very different from Elkanah's. Us, we kind of look at it and we're like, why? Why do you not get it, Elkanah? Can we learn anything from Eli's inability to understand his wife's feelings?
I think one thing, too, he didn't even mention the fact that he already has kids with his other wife.
No.
And maybe a way of looking at it, too, like, he's a big man, he doesn't like it. And I don't know, but he already has children.
Okay.
He doesn't realize how, like, maybe taking that for granted.
Yeah.
Often we overlook what we already have because we already have it.
Yeah, great point. Because, yeah, he may be looking at it as, I don't need, the point is, I don't need other kids. I don't need you to give me kids. That's what I got the second wife for, you know. He's seeing it, and somebody said he's thinking like I think a couple people said he's thinking like a man. And this may be kind of a male way of sort of seeing things in terms of solving the problem, right? We had a problem. We didn't have any kids. I got another wife. She had a bunch of kids. The problem is solved. I love you. I obviously love you more than the other wife, so you have no reason to be jealous. I fixed all the problems. You know, let's be happy now. So I think that is kind of a male way of approaching things. Go ahead.
looking at it from a woman's
Yeah.
if a woman can't have children, it is just absolutely traumatic for her.
No.
Because that is one of the purposes of women is to have children. And if you've ever seen anybody struggle with their children,
Yeah.
and IVF, it is a heartbreaking process.
Yes.
And so he is just not in tune to her.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, he hears it, but in his mind, it's not a reason. But in her mind, it is.
Yeah, amen. I will try to repeat that because I don't know if everyone could hear it, but help me out if I miss anything here. Is we're talking about how, you know, for a woman, it's such a big deal to not be able to bear children. And I'm glad you said it because we kind of live in a society where I'm not supposed to say what you said, which was I think you said, it's part of a woman's role, or what was the word? Part of a woman's role to have children, right? Purpose, that's the word. Part of a woman's purpose is to have children. And that's not something we really talk about in this modern society of ours because, like, you know, we don't want to make that to be that that's all a woman can do. We've kind of lost the fact that, yeah, sure, women can do other things, but they're the only ones that can have children. That's got to be part of a woman's purpose because it can't be my purpose. I can't do it. None of the men here will ever be able to do it. So part of a woman's purpose, having a different biology than men, is to produce children. And the comment that's being made here is that for a woman not to be able to do that, even if her husband is saying, hey, I don't need any more kids, is very traumatic. People agree with that? Do women agree with that? Yeah, I think it's very, and even, I mean, many women were different, we're also similar. I mean, I had difficulty having children as well. As a man, I found it, when I thought I was not going to be able to have children, it was very traumatic for me. But I think it is probably, as you say, I think it's more traumatic for women. And we actually had fertility, went through fertility. That's how we got Caleb. If anyone ever, I'll find it sometime if anyone ever wanted to see it. We have a picture of Caleb when there were was it 7 or 8? Was it 7? There were 7 cells in his body. Because he was fertilized outside the womb. And they took a picture of him under a microscope after that first cell started to divide. It had divided into 7 cells. They took a photograph of it before he was implanted. And so it's fascinating to see that him at that stage of development. But then with Christopher, we just had another kid. The doctor said, you could have another round of treatments and do in vitro again, or you could just, it's expensive, or you could just hope for the best, and maybe there's always that chance you'll have one the natural way, and we did. And as my reaction is to thank God for that. That comes from God. And so I kind of get that, understand that feeling of thinking you're not going to have a child and then God blessing you with one. But I think you are probably correct that from a woman's perspective, for a woman to not be able to have children, it is a bigger deal. And Elkanah, as some people said, thinks like a man, and he doesn't get it. But can we learn anything from that? What can we learn from? I knew I had all these typos. I put Eli. It should be Elkanah. Can we learn from Elkanah's mistake here, or his attitude? Oh, good.
Can I go with my comment earlier about taking it for granted and partnering with Karen's comment about her offering her dedication of her child to God? Things that we have to wrestle with and really struggle for, we inherently appreciate so much more. When it comes really easy.
Yeah.
And I look at that even with, if I take it to the example of my own faith, my own walk with God. I grew up in a church family for a lot of years. I took that for granted. But I've had friends that they came to an understanding of God and Christ and their faith through a much more difficult traversing. And their appreciation of it is just leaps and bounds above what I've ever was for a long time.
Yeah, we were talking about how you appreciate things more if they have to come by. But does Elkanah at least, let's not talk about the way he's treating his second wife, but to Hannah, is he seem like a good husband to Hannah? Yeah, I think he seems like a pretty good husband to Hannah. And yet he still makes a huge mistake. What do we get from that? Yeah, at least he notices. But can a good spouse sometimes do very insensitive things? It seems like that is the case here with Elkanah. So if you have a husband, if you have a wife, and they show a complete disregard for your situation, is it because they don't like you, or could it be that they just don't get it? Yeah, I think sometimes we just don't get it. And we've kind of talked a little bit this morning about how sometimes men and women see things a little bit differently. And sometimes I may not get it because I see things differently than Carla, and sometimes she may not get it because she sees things differently than me. But it's not reflective of a lack of love or a lack of dedication to each other. So I think Elkanah is a pretty good husband, but he doesn't understand his wife in this case. Okay, slight shifting gears. I want to talk about temple or tabernacle. In verse 9, does Hannah go to the temple or the tabernacle? Okay, that's a rhetorical question. I'm going to answer it. Hekel means temple. That's the word that's used there. Or it could also mean palace. Or it can mean sanctuary. But it always refers to a large building, a holy temple. Something which is a building. It doesn't refer to a tent. It's used to describe the temple of Jerusalem in the Old Testament. It's frequently used to describe other buildings, but always buildings. The tabernacle or tent was referred to as a mishkan. All right. Oh, I want to do this a couple one at a time. Why is a tabernacle called a hekel? In verse 9. If it's not. Any thoughts? What's that? What? Oh, do not all translate. Well, I think a lot of English translations go ahead and translate it temple, but the Greek word, the Hebrew word is not usually used for temple, or is not usually used for tabernacle. I think the translations know it's referring to the tabernacle, so they put that there. But it is a word that is not otherwise used to describe the tabernacle in the Bible. Any thoughts?
Well, temples are residents of God,
Yeah, temples are residents of God.
and so this is where God is.
Yeah.
And so that's probably
Okay.
why that term is
Yeah, so it is the temple and has the same role. The temple is where God lives, and he lived in the tabernacle at this time. It is not the word you would usually use to describe it, though. I have found a few ideas. I meant to have them come up one at a time, but I messed up the PowerPoint. Temple may be used to denote that since the tent had been standing in one location over a dozen generations, it was now effectively a permanent structure. They may have started thinking of it less of a tent because it had stood there so long, especially if they had built something physical around it, as we talked about earlier, that may have become identified with it. But I thought also it could be used to emphasize, and this I would tie this to what you said. You know, it is the same thing. It's the place of God. The tabernacle and the temple are, in that sense, the same thing. So it could have been used to emphasize its connection to the temple of Jerusalem, especially if the book was completed by others after Samuel's death. Then it may have been completed when the holy temple already stood. Again, we already saw, even to this day, the book could have been written some years in the future. So the temple may already be standing or be in the process of being built, or at least be prophesied about at the time this is written. And by referring to this as the temple, it may remind people, hey, yeah, it used to be a tent, but this is the same dwelling place of God that we used to have. It just used to be in Shiloh, where now, when the book is being written, perhaps it is in Jerusalem. So I don't think there was any great controversy over the fact that Hekla is used, but it may have been chosen quite intentionally, either to reflect the basically permanent nature of the tabernacle by this point, or to remind people that this was the same thing as the temple. Okay, so Hannah's reaction to being childless. She went to the house of the Lord every year. She prayed, and she made a vow to the Lord. Why did Hannah go to the house of the Lord every year, and why did she pray, and why did she make a vow to the Lord? Yeah, she had faith. So going to the house of the Lord every year was something that faithful Jews were supposed to do. Why is she praying to God? There's no other way out of the situation. She has a problem and she wants a solution. Who is she turning to solve her problem? To God. And why? You gave one reason, because no one else is going to be able to solve it. You know, Carla and I had the benefit of modern medicine, but Hannah's only option is to turn to God. Any other reason why? Or anything you can say about Hannah because her solution is to turn to God in prayer? Yeah. 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 Amen. Children are a gift from God. So if children are a gift from God, who do you turn to when you want that thing? I bring this up because Hannah's sort of forced in this situation, right? She doesn't have anywhere else to turn. But maybe sometimes if you see another option, it may be tempting. Like, stick to the thing of, I mentioned modern fertility treatments. If you're having difficulty having children, you may see a doctor. I wouldn't oppose that. That's what we did. But at the same time you're seeing a doctor, who else do you need to be turning to? The Lord, right? You wouldn't want to leave it just in the hands of modern medicine. You want to turn to the God. So she's turning to the God because, as was said, children are a gift from Him, and so He's the one you want to ask. And a lot of times in our prayers, maybe we need to praise God more than we do in our prayers. That sometimes is a little deficient, sometimes maybe. But this aspect of asking God for things is an important part of prayer. We're not being pests when we turn to God and ask Him for the things we want in this world. That's what He wants us to do. He wants us to turn to Him when we have needs and ask Him to fill those needs. So here's a little bit maybe more meaty question. Why did she make a vow? She's going to give her son to the Lord. And I think it was kind of hinted at in a comment that was made earlier that maybe that's just what she wanted. Maybe she just wanted a son that was dedicated to the Lord. But I think there may be another side to this. What's the purpose of offering this vow? Yeah, so it's a seal of bargain. What do we mean by that? What's that? You do this and I'll do this, right? There's some bargaining going on here. It's not just give me a son. It's if you give me a son, I will do this. What do you think about that? Is she bargaining with God?
It's a weird bargain. It is a bargain, but it's a weird,
Yeah.
It's not for her own gain. She's
Well,
actually sacrificing.
Well, yeah, but that's right. But that's because she's giving something back. It's like, you give me something, I'll give you something, right? That's the way a bargain works. So she's saying to God, you give me a child, but it's not for nothing, God. I'm not asking for free. I'm not asking for a handout here. If you do this for me, I will dedicate him to God. Is that what's going on here?
Mike, just
Sure.
along with that thought, I mean, I recognize myself, I'm sure plenty of people were around the point. Like, as we said, God is the giver,
Yeah.
but really He gives us everything. And really, it's just, we want to give back to
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
Like, what,
Yeah, so,
And so as a parent, my best thing to do is to try to raise my kids so that they can give themselves
Yeah,
to God.
yeah.
Now, granted, she at this point, the son that's in the future can't give himself, but she can give him
yeah,
that.
yeah. So she can give him, and everything comes from God. So, it's sort of like when we give back on Sunday morning, you're not really, giving God anything it's not already his. But why? Why does she offer to give him back? Is it because, as has already been said, that it's a bargain? Is it a way to get what she wants? Is it like, right? Is this something that she's doing to induce God to fulfill her prayer? Yes.
This is something that's actually much older than Hannah. The firstborn always belonged to God. Going all the way back to the Passover and really even before that. And so she's just showing the recognition that a firstborn son belongs to God. And she's just making that very obvious by saying, you give me a firstborn son, I dedicate him to you.
Okay, so is that what's happening here? What's being suggested is this is just Hannah reiterating her understanding of what is already the case, that a firstborn son is dedicated to God? Or is she offering a greater dedication than is normal for a firstborn son? What's so great? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if you couldn't hear that, James was saying it seems like a greater dedication, and he made the point that she specifically says, no razor will touch his head. That's not a usual expectation of just otherwise we would say every son has long hair in Israel because they're all dedicated to God. She's promising, seems to me, to be promising more than, though it probably is rooted in that, right, that the first son is dedicated to God anyway, but she's going beyond that, and we'll look at the details of, I think, what she's doing here in just a moment. But why? Why is she offering more to dedicate this child? Or if you want to just focus on that one aspect, why is she saying no razor will touch his head?
It's a form of sacrifice.
It's a form of sacrifice, and is she trying through that sacrifice to induce God to give her what she wants?
She's responding. She's
Pre-responding. Other thoughts?
And I think a broader part of this, I mentioned the firstborn is dedicated to God,
Yeah.
but really everything that God gives us should be dedicated to serve God, to glorify God in some way.
Yes.
And I think when we talk about, you mentioned the bargain with God, that she gets what she wants. What she wants is to be able to glorify God. And so
Yes.
she's asking God, give me a son so that I can glorify you through him by dedicating him to you.
Okay. And to come back to Adam's, you said I'm sort of running this through my head. But I want to make it sort of bring it to an analogy. You're saying sort of what was the word? Would you use pre-responding? Right. But I think the idea we're getting at, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but we're saying like we talk about, you know, why do we respond? And do we respond in order to earn our salvation? We say no. God has blessed us and we respond. So I think what you were maybe saying that she's saying, God, I want you to give me this thing, and I'm not trying to bribe you, God, but just so you know, I'm the kind of person that when you do this for me, my response is going to be to dedicate him to you.
It's an expression of faith.
It's an expression of faith.
Similar to what Jacob did, you know, when he had the dream,
Okay.
wrestling with God. He makes these gifted statements, but they're not bargaining with God.
Does anybody feel that she is motivated in dedicating her unborn son in this way because she feels that by promising to do that, God is more likely to hear her prayer?
There was an interesting commentary in Patty's Bible that this comes from a Nazarite vow where they vow not to take a race with that, but this is the only example of someone giving that vow for another.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and we'll get to, I'd probably be next week when we look at the Nazarite vow and how this, in relation to this. But real quick, and we may follow up with this question next week, is anybody think that she's making this special promise in order to increase God's likelihood of fulfilling her prayer, of answering her prayer? Does anyone feel like it reads that way, even if our theology tells us that's not the case? Does it sound that way if you were just reading as an outsider? It does, yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and could she maybe have prayed this before? Because probably you would think she's got a prayer life. She's probably prayed to God before about the thing she wants the most as a child. It's not an unnatural inference to think she's been praying in the past, give me a child, give me a child. But now she's saying, if you give me a child. And that if kind of seems to me to kind of conflict a little bit with the pre-notion, because she's not saying, hey, I'm the kind of woman that if I had a child, I would dedicate it to God. But it's rather, if you give me a child under the current circumstances and in my suffering, then and under those circumstances, this is what I would do. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I mean, if you've ever, she's in this state of despair.
Yeah.
She has nothing
Yeah.
to give.
Yeah.
And so I think it's this idea that if you give me this, I'll give you what is most important to me. I think it's not like making a deal. I think, obviously we can't do
Yeah.
it for God anyway.
Yeah.
She's in this state of despair. She's like begging God,
Okay.
I'll give up everything.
So maybe it's not, maybe I'm wrong to call it a deal, but maybe it just appeals to her sense of fairness. Maybe the sense of, I'm asking you for a lot, God, so I should give something back.
I'm also thinking too, like, so under the circumstances of a vow, you're giving up something, right?
Right.
You're saying I'm going to give you this thing, but to her, the most precious thing she could give is that thing she
Yeah.
doesn't have. So the only circumstance where she can give the greatest thing is to be given it first.
Yeah. Yeah, and then maybe there's a sense there of, I would have, you know, I want to give you a great gift, but I can't because I don't have any kids.
Right.
But if I had kids, I could give you this great gift. Real quick, did you have one more comment?
I mean, I know that she would know that God knows her heart, but she has to have been, because of her grief, assessing why have I not had a
Yeah.
child? And perhaps, if there's any doubt, your father, why I want this child, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
she felt like it's possible
Yeah.
that one of the reasons she wouldn't have a child is the motivation. You know what I'm saying?
So to show her sincerity.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so we may pick up, I wanted to pick up on this question. I think we've answered it pretty well, but we'll touch on this at the beginning of the next class and go into some other thoughts I have following up on this. And thank you all, and we'll discuss this more on Sunday. Thank you, or next Sunday.